Hi, and welcome back to my channel, My Tax Guy, where we discuss all things tax so that you guys get a better understanding of everything that's going out in the tax world, and hopefully it helps make a positive impact for you and you're able to navigate the tax system much easier with a lot more understanding. Now let's jump right in because I have a very interesting article from Bloomberg News that I literally just read, and I almost, gotta be honest, cannot believe that this is happening. The article title is MoneyGram Millions Have States Duking It Out in Supreme Court. Now, this is typically one of those topics, I will be honest with you, is very, very advanced. But we're going to focus on the part that actually affects people. Even though a lot of this is more between what happens between corporations and how they basically classify cash and cash receivables and short-term assets so that they, of course, can pay as little tax on it as possible. But in this case, this is actually more to do with the state ends and honestly individuals, even though the article pretty much goes into how it's not really going to affect you guys. And for the most part, that is true. This issue will not affect you, not in a direct sense that you would be like, oh my God, you would see a difference like with your paycheck or with withholding, stuff like that. But if you're someone who's a homeowner, someone who has to be responsible for maybe having a small business, things like that, this article will affect you. And let's just jump in. So MoneyGram Millions Have States Duking Out in Supreme Court. This article is basically talking about how unclaimed funds, how they're being used and classified by the states. Now, most of the states, this actually isn't the biggest issue for companies like MoneyGram, Western Union, you know, those places that wire money abroad or even just wire money to maybe even a county or something over. Maybe you just don't have time to go, and that's just the most efficient way. Of course, now with all the apps like Zelle and Cash App and things like that, honestly, I don't know how these things even still exist, but that's neither here nor there. The issue with this is that the money that they're talking about is something called unclaimed funds. Now, typically, unclaimed funds happens, maybe you won $10 at a grocery store with a scratch off, and you're like, it's $10. I don't need to bother with it. But what you also need to understand is that it's money and the state really isn't going to let any dollar go to waste. After a year in New York, for instance, you're entitled to basically keep the money, which means the state, because no one's come forward to claim it in that time, they're keeping that money. Now, that's not the biggest issue in states like New York, where, trust me, I don't imagine something like what I'm about to describe to you in Delaware happening. But I just can't believe it. Delaware, because it is one of the states where a lot of people incorporate at, because it is like the easiest thing to incorporate in Delaware. There are entire businesses that are literally built, an industry, to be perfectly frank with you, built solely to help people incorporate. And it is one of the most lucrative things for the state to have that business. It accounts for roughly a third of the state's budget. So it's a really big thing. Now, here's the thing that also comes in with that third of the state budget. And this is where these funds come in, these unclaimed funds. The state is really trying to figure out whether or not they are responsible for getting that money back to anyone. They literally want to hold on to that money. And what they're saying is that because MoneyGram, for instance, is incorporated in the state of Delaware, that money is their money. And the type of money we're talking about hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars in about 32 states. It is amazing the amount of cash that we're talking about. And this is not on some this built up over the years. This is hundreds of millions of dollars on an annual basis. So imagine you go to MoneyGram, you send someone $3,000. For whatever reason, they cannot go to MoneyGram and claim that $3,000. They don't have the ID. They misspelled your name on the form to claim the money. Whatever the reason is, they're like, I'll just have to pay you back the $3,000. Of course, you get your $3,000 back. That person, of course, out of the $3,000. So what happens? Or they don't even tell you that they weren't able to pick up the money. But what happens to the money? Well, it stays there. And depending on what state you're in, they have laws that specify how long property can go without being unclaimed before it becomes property of the state. New York has a lost and found law. It's 365 days. On the 366th day, it officially becomes property of New York. Now, if it's like regular property, like a duffel bag full of shoes, or it's some groceries, they're not holding on to groceries, by the way, for years. So those things, as soon as they go bad, they're going in the garbage. But maybe it's just some non-perishable item that just is sticking around, and the state is obligated to hold on to that for that time frame. Now, once that happens, it literally goes over to the state, and they can do it what they will. Well, money works the same way. So there's a time frame, they can hold on to it, and after that time frame is done, that money's supposed to go over to the state. Now, the reason why it's such a big deal in Delaware, when your money that you not claim from places like MoneyGram, Western Union, the reason why it's a big deal is because unclaimed property makes up the third largest single revenue source for the state. It has accounted for, let's say, about $450 million, give or take $1 million, of the state's entire budget, revenue budget, which is about $5.4 billion. It is one of the largest, like fractional wise or percentage wise, largest sources of that state's income. So they, of course, are not trying to give any of that money back, because you have to also understand that because that's coming in, they're not raising taxes, right? They're not asking for larger revenue shares. They're not issuing more bonds. And the thing about states that issue bonds is the state can issue the bond, but then at some point they have to pay that bond back. And do you know how they get the money to do that? They're either going to raise taxes to cover the amount of the bond, or they're going to issue more bonds. Honestly, to be frank with you, New York is one of those beautiful states. They just issue more bonds. We're just liquid. People just assume that we're always going to have it to pay it back. So our bonds never have those kind of problems. However, a place like Detroit, to be honest with you, their bonds at one point went into the junk bond category. And that's the last place you want a municipality to have their bonds at, because it's the government. If the government can't okay you lending the money, then there's no point. Let's get back to Delaware. So Delaware is clearly not trying to give that money back. It allows them to have more leeway to not have to go to its constituents and say, hey, we need funding for X program, or we need funding for X project. And they don't have to come back to the taxpayers and ask them for money, because they have that source coming in. Now, the problem, however, with MoneyGram is that the people that send the money don't all live in Delaware. In fact, a lot of them don't live in Delaware at all. Delaware is a pretty small state. I'm not even sure if their population is anywhere near 2 million yet. If I remember correctly, they're still under 1 million people in that entire state. It's a small state, so that's not the biggest thing in the world, but you have to understand that a lot of people use those services, and the vast majority of them don't live there. But because the company is considered domiciled to the state, because they incorporated there, they have no intention on like giving that money up. And other states' contention is, well, wait a minute, hold on. All of that money that's unclaimed can't possibly be theirs because it's being sent from places that are nowhere in the vicinity of Delaware. You know, one of the states, of course, in contention with them, besides ours, of course, are states like California and Utah. And they are nowhere near Delaware. But they also have a stake in the fight as far as claiming some of that money for themselves. So it's really it's a funny issue and it's a big issue. I wouldn't say this issue probably wouldn't exist as much if MoneyGram probably focused on getting customers their money, or at least focused on making sure that if the money is not being sent or the party cannot retrieve it, that it goes back to the originator, which is the person who sent it in the first place. MoneyGram doesn't make that their priority. More or less, once you send it, they've done their part. And anything after that is, we sent it, that's what you basically pay that fee for. It's out of our hands until the person gets whatever proper documentation they need to retrieve whatever money. Now, one of the other issues that is causing a lot of this back and forth and the concern here is the fact that MoneyGram essentially wants to reclassify those transactions as check transactions so that they're no longer required to do anything with the unclaimed funds, and they won't have to worry about sending it to multiple states. And that's really a thing. So they're literally reclassifying the money. They're like, hey, we don't want to do the dirty work of actually having to go to these other states to find these people who sent the money and it's unclaimed. So we reclassified the money we send as checks. And as a check, it is no longer their responsibility. It then falls on the sender and the receiver to keep track of the transaction. That's actually something that, again, you as a person that is using that service, you need to be aware of that, because you're sending money, and if it doesn't get to the person, you're going to have to trust that, you know, the company is going to notify you of that. And I'm going to tell you, they don't notify you. And this doesn't just go for wire money transfer. So I don't want you to just think, because I'm primarily focusing on that because that's the primary medium of exchange for MoneyGram. No, they also have money orders. The money orders are also part of this. And again, they are treated as checks. So if your money order that you write out doesn't make it to the other party for whatever reason, and the money literally sits there, there's really no other way for you to know. Unless the other party, of course, says, hey, we never got your payment. Then you can go, okay, I have to go to MoneyGram to get my money. So it's only through the communication between the sender and the receiver that they're even able to have an idea of how to either get the money back or how to get it to the other person or the other party. And that's really the gist of the argument for MoneyGram. Now, the craziest part about this entire thing is, you know, that MoneyGram is not part of this legal battle. That's right. The corporation that essentially caused this problem is not part of the battle. So it's really amazing to see how an entire industry could cause a headache for, of course, us taxpayers, and then they not be responsible for any of it. They're basically like, hey, however you guys figure this out, we're going to be good with whatever decision comes out of there. Because, of course, they've already figured out a way to make sure that it's not their responsibility to worry about where your money is going. So, again, not the biggest tax issue, but it's one of those things that's like a life issue where you have to pay attention to it, because it's really a big thing as far as like how states get their money, how states budget for whatever programs and projects that they want to fund, and how corporations go about basically get away with doing the bare minimum to make sure that they're securing funds and property for the people that are using their service. Because I can tell people that this opened my eyes. I actually just bought a money order for MoneyGram last week, and reading this is amazing. The first thing I did was I actually went to go with my tracking number on their site to see if my money order was received by the other party. They got it. But that's one of those things where if you're not paying attention to it and you're not tracking it, you basically going to have to do due diligence if you use that service, which is a major inconvenience, because part of the reason why you're using it is because it's supposed to take care of all of those things for you. Now, I want to thank everyone for coming in here. I'm going to be back. I'm going to be doing way more of these reactions to all sorts of news. Later on in the week, I will be going over that IRS situation with those 990 forms, the information from them that was released. So I want you guys to stay tuned. I'm going to also be covering that as well. I want to thank everybody for tuning in. Thank you for watching my channel. Please hit the subscribe button, like and share, help my channel grow. I really want to make it to 1,000 subscribers, and I can do it with your help. Thank you, and you have a great week, and I'll speak to you soon.